in a democracy with laws, there's supposed to be freedom of the press. The National Lawyers Guild sued the intelligence agencies and FBI, and about 15 years later, we got 40 pages of documents, the least sensational of their surveillances of rat. There was no belief at that time, this is Johnson and then Nixon, in the right to free press. We were motivated by human rights, including blacks, gays, women, etc., and economic rights, and against the war in Vietnam, which was a horrible misadventure, and we were serving the public by resisting that foolish war. Sometimes I was followed by FBI agents. The neighbors told us that the Ukrainians across the street on the second floor apartment got kicked out so that they could have long lens cameras filming us with a zoom lens through our bay window 24 hours a day. And many months later, we realized that when we moved to our 14th Street office, they considered the phone taps such a high priority that I stopped paying the phone bill and the phone never got turned off. Researcher Dale Brumfield, a university professor, has supplied us from his archive of more than 3,000 FBI documents, information about the FBI disrupting RAT and the other underground press. The program they worked under was COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO is the counterintelligence program, which was illegal under the Constitution, but was used to disrupt anti-war, New Left, many other groups, and particularly the underground press.
The COINTELPRO program actually began in May of 1968 when Deputy Director of the FBI, William Sullivan, and Charles D. Brennan put a memo out to J. Edgar Hoover, the director, in a way to stop the growing New Left movement and the underground press, which was becoming the mouthpiece of the growing New Left movement. The COINTELPRO New Left program was a direct offshoot of other COINTEL programs dating back to the late 1950s, including programs against the Ku Klux Klan, the black nationalist groups, and against communism. J. Edgar Hoover then, with no legislative oversight or authority, created the COINTELPRO New Left program in order to disrupt, neutralize, and harass the New Left movement and the underground press. Operation Chaos was designed to look for foreign influence into the New Left movement and the underground press. Now, this program was in direct violation of CIA charters because they were not supposed to do any type of surveillance on Americans. However, Chaos, under the auspices of looking for foreign influence in the New Left movement, began to collect information on Americans on a computer named Hydra. And over the next 4 years, the CIA actually collected information on over 300,000 Americans in direct violation of their charter. I have here a couple of things I should read right from the documents. Meeting with a Cuban attaché who is a friend that would debate politics, says here, on January 28, 1969, a special agent of the FBI observed Jesus Jimenez Escobar enter the office of Rat Subterranean News at 201 East 4th Street. Shero and his girlfriend, Alice Embry, left with Escobar and left the Rat Subterranean News office at 7:30 and were observed having dinner together. Well, that's a big crime. The sophistication of the FBI and the other intelligence agencies certainly matured. RAT, like other movement organizations, always was looking for who the FBI plant was in our organization. They usually had a very destructive role. I remember George Demerly, who was a tall, lanky, kind of geeky guy that wore a Trojan helmet with a crest on top. And we were having a meeting in Jerry Rubin's apartment over an anti-war action, and Demerly was there, and we thought he was just a fool. But we're going around talking about what we should do, and he said, well, he started talking about bombing.
which was obviously a stupid thing. He made this appeal at some point in the meeting. Well, these are old washed up fogies kind of talk. Anybody who wants to do real stuff, real, would be militant. Everybody write down their names and phone numbers and we'll have a meeting. Later it turned out Demerly was a cop. We found out when he testified at a trial against one of the anti-war demonstrators. I often thought that Jane Alpert might be the plant because she had brought me an article about how to hijack an airplane. It was not describing what people did, but it was an advocacy article. I said, Jane, this is the kind of stuff that puts you in jail. You can't advocate. It turned out that she was in a secret group that put bombs, not injuring people, but on targets like Grace Bank and other political targets, and they were very careful not to injure people because there was a big division between injuring innocent people and injuring property. And so at one point we had 5 people involved with our staff that were in this ring of bombers. Well, that of course attracted the intelligence agencies, and from their point of view, rightfully so. And we were caught in between making smart statements about the war, but not committing on this issue of bombings.
If we do our job right, we're going to either be put out of business by the cops or go under financially. That's what it should be all about. That's kind of guerrilla journalism.
It's clear that they made the decision not to come in and bust the rat on trumped up charges or maybe some misdemeanors that we were guilty of, but to squeeze us economically. They felt that we would get too much sympathy in public if they came in and said the rat was a big conspiracy and they wanted to arrest us all and have a trial. They went to our distributors, they went to major newsstands, particularly important for the whole underground press, that high levels, maybe of the FBI or maybe one of the other intelligence agencies, visited the record companies who were the backbone of advertising for our papers and asked them to stop advertising in the underground press. And that was enormously effective. If they could get us our distribution squashed, get our advertisers squashed, they realized that it would be very hard to keep in business. Columbia Records was one of the most important advertisers in the rat and the underground press. We got full pages almost weekly. They ran an ad that said, "The man can't bust your music." About 3 months later, they were no longer advertising in the underground press. The man had busted our music. With these FBI documents, it shows that the FBI bypassed the head of Columbia Records and went to the parent company, Columbia Broadcasting Systems, CBS TV, and the head of that was a longtime worker with the CIA, Frank Stanton, and they said, these people are domestic terrorists with international connections. Columbia Records should abandon them. And Frank Stanton passed down the word to Clive Davis, the head of Columbia Records, to stop advertising in the underground press. It's one of the most important things that Dale Brumfield has released with the documents that he got from the FBI.
One of the things the FBI did too, which was in direct violation of the First Amendment, was they pressured Columbia Records to stop advertising in the underground press. Now, the underground press was experiencing tremendous growth from 1967 to 1969, when it went from 26 papers nationwide to over 400 papers nationwide. So in their effort to shut these papers down and stop the New Left movement, what the FBI did was they started pressuring Columbia Records, who was a steady advertiser in the underground press, to stop advertising. Now, this is a direct First Amendment violation and really an interruption of free commerce. The FBI sent memos to Columbia Records telling them that they were aiding and abetting enemies of the United States by advertising in the underground press. Columbia Records in turn canceled many advertising contracts with the underground press, and because of losing such a large advertiser, many papers in the underground press then went completely out of business due to the loss of these contracts. This is a memo from the FBI headquarters in San Francisco to J. Edgar Hoover, where it's stating that another similar incident is indicated on page 5 of the enclosed memo, wherein Columbia Records is identified as contemplating advertisements in underground newspapers and contemplating support to subsidize a New Left propaganda program. Such financial assistance from Life and from Columbia Records appears to be giving active aid and comfort to enemies of the United States. So basically, the FBI was accusing Life magazine and Columbia Records of treason.
This is interesting. Rat may fold in the next few weeks. The rise of the sex papers, the increasing mood of repression, which was, of course, government repression by the FBI and others. The liberals lurch towards the safe center, may be trends too deep for Rat to overcome. And, of course, they were correct. They were able to squeeze underground papers, including the Rat, throughout the country and close them down. Following this video, we're very happy to have a 15-minute interview with Professor Dale Brumfield. He explores FBI illegal involvement and disruption of domestic organizations, including the underground press, the Black Panthers, and anti-war groups. If you're a serious student, you should watch it.
Chaos had two other offshoot programs called Operation Merrimack and Operation Resistance. Now, Operation Merrimack was designed to actually infiltrate collectives, underground papers, and other New Left student activities, including the Students for Democratic Society, or the SDS. One famous example of infiltration was at the Quicksilver Times, an underground paper in Washington, D.C. A man named Sal Ferreira came into Quicksilver wanting to be a part of the underground press and began working there, and actually worked there for 18 months using both the names Sal Ferreira and Sal Torre. Now, it turns out Ferreira was a CIA operative, presumably operating under Operation Merrimack. Ferreira stayed at the Quicksilver Times for 18 months. He shot photographs, he wrote stories. He even famously brought in wiretapping equipment and swept the entire offices for bugs for the Quicksilver Times when they were suspicious that maybe the FBI was bugging their collective. After 18 months, Ferreira then left. And oddly enough, Ferreira then went to a man named Chip Burlett at the College Press Service, told Burlett that he would like to be a Paris correspondent. He moved to Paris, where he met up with Philip Agee. Now, Philip Agee was writing a tell-all book about the CIA, out of the reach of his secrecy contract. So when Ferreira made friends with Philip Agee, he told Agee that his typewriter was no good and he needed a new typewriter. Agee was very poor at the time, and he had agreed to accept a typewriter given to him by Ferreira and his girlfriend. It turned out this contained transmitters and microphones and had been transmitting his location back to the CIA headquarters for several months. In Washington, D.C., in particular, the FBI was very concerned about New Left activity and the underground press, as they were headquartered there, and they didn't want these operations going on right under their own nose. So they came up with various initiatives in D.C. to counter the New Left movement. One of the initiatives they came up with was the creation of a phony underground newspaper. In particular, at American University, which is located in downtown D.C., New Left activity was gaining strength. There were many protests, many problems that they associated with the New Left movement going on there. So they came up with the idea to create a phony underground newspaper. It was called the Rational Observer. Now, this newspaper was designed to counter the New Left activities at American University and introduce a more moderate voice. It was ostensibly created by students and distributed on the campus at American University. The problem was the paper was not believed by almost anyone. It was so ham-handed and so ridiculous, the things that they discussed, that no one really believed it, and it just wound up making moderate voices look stupid because nobody could believe what was being said in the paper. There were other campuses where the FBI did this too. In particular, at the University of Indiana Bloomington, they created a paper called Armageddon News, which published 4 or 5 issues with no one really catching on. It was much better produced, so no one really suspected it of being a phony. They proposed another phony underground paper at the University of Texas at Austin called the Longhorn Tale. Unfortunately, this paper never made it past the planning stages, and today only a logo and masthead exists of that. One of the things they talked about in the paper, The Rational Observer at American University, was warning students to stop protesting the Vietnam War. They said, look, you need to think about your future. If you protest the war today, it could come back to haunt you later in life. He said many students, one article said many students like to get jobs with the Defense Department, and protesting the Vietnam War or engaging in these protests may hurt your security clearance in the future. You may not be able to get these jobs in the Defense Department. So it was almost like a mother hen type of admonishing her children. This is another phony publication created by the FBI called Into the Street, a handbook for revolting kids. It basically is a children's story that goes on and on and on, comparing them to the New Left movement and the problems of creating and being a militant student. This is a copy of the masthead created by the FBI for the Longhorn Tale, a phony underground paper that was going to be distributed at the University of Texas in Austin. The paper, however, never got published. J. Edgar Hoover pulled the plug on it, saying that there was not enough New Left activity in Austin at the time to justify it. This was another mock-up, believe it or not, of the cover of the Longhorn Tale at the University of Texas in Austin. Thank goodness this cover was not used. The FBI had field offices across the entire country, each one run by a special agent in charge, or an SAC. All of these field offices were asked by Hoover to look for ways to disrupt the New Left movement in their respective cities. But they were to take no actions on their own. Hoover was a micromanager. He did not want any of these special agents in charge to be acting on their own, so any ideas that they came up with to harass or disrupt the New Left movement, they were supposed to run it through Hoover first, and he would either approve it or shoot it down. In Detroit, a very interesting situation happened when the special agent in charge notified J. Edgar Hoover that he had an agent who could get within 3 feet of bundles of Black Panther newspapers when they were delivered to that city for distribution. The memo that came from that SAC to Hoover suggested the FBI create a foul-smelling liquid that could be sprayed on the bundles of papers, preferably the most foul-smelling feces that they could find. In particular, pig shit. This is a memo dated October 13th, 1970, to J. Edgar Hoover from the Detroit field office. This memo is saying the Bureau is requested to prepare and furnish to Detroit in liquid form a solution capable of duplicating a scent of the most foul-smelling feces available. In this case, it might be appropriate to duplicate the feces of the species Sus scrofa, which basically is pig shit. The COINTEL FBI program was especially difficult on the Black Panther Party. One of the things J. Edgar Hoover particularly worried about was the rise of what he called a black messiah out of the Black Panther Party. He saw Dr. Martin Luther King, Stokely Carmichael, and Elijah Muhammad as potential black messiahs who may rise and create a lot of discord among the black nationalist movement with the FBI and CIA and other organizations. So the FBI then embarked on a series of harassment techniques to bring down the Black Panther Party. One in particular, the Black Panthers had started out in Chicago creating an inner-city breakfast program for children. Well, for some reason, the FBI considered this inappropriate And one of the things they did, one of the many things they did, was they created a Black Panther coloring book intended to be mailed to white supporters of the Black Panther's breakfast program. Well, it turns out the Black Panther coloring book was terrible. It portrayed the Panthers as bloodthirsty heathens, and it portrayed policemen as pigs. And it was completely appropriate in this coloring book to commit violence against police. So the response of the white backers of the breakfast program when they received this coloring book, well, they were astonished that this was what was going on, what they thought was going on with the Black Panther Party, and they pulled their money out of the breakfast program then. This is the cover of the infamous Black Panther coloring book, created by the FBI and mailed out to white backers of the Black Panther breakfast program in inner city Chicago. This is one of the cartoons from the Black Panther coloring book. Not hard to see why it would be so offensive to so many people. It shows children with guns shooting policemen. The caption says, "The pig is afraid of black children because they are brave warriors." Another cartoon from the FBI's Black Panther coloring book shows a black person pointing a gun at a begging policeman. The caption says, "Power comes through the barrel of a gun." The FBI was not just interested in creating phony underground newspapers and in creating a phony Black Panther coloring book. They also were interested in creating other publications that could be distributed sometimes to parents, to tell parents, this is what your children are up to, hoping that the parents would then bring their children in and get them out of the New Left movement. One of those was a publication. It was supposed to be a parody of the SDS New Left Notes newspaper. It was called SDS New Laugh Notes. With New Laugh Notes, it was basically a series of very crudely drawn cartoons showing leaders of the SDS, people like Tom Hayden, Bernadine Dorn, and others, in situations that were showing that they were corrupt and using SDS dues for their own personal gain. One in particular has drawings of Bernadine Dorn lying on a couch talking about taking vacations to the Riviera and raising dues because she wants to buy jewelry or furniture or something. This is the cover of the SDS New Laugh Notes, Volume 1, Number 1. This was a phony publication created by the FBI as a parody of the New Left Notes of the Students for Democratic Society. This is an image of a cartoon created by the FBI showing Bernadine Dorn, who was then president of the National Office of the Students for Democratic Society, reclining on a couch saying, "Let's raise the dues. I want to go to the Riviera." Here we have an image of Bernadine Dorn with a suitcase with stickers of countries all over the world, dollar bills sticking out saying, "Join SDS, see the world." This is an image of a cartoon done by the FBI showing SDS President Tom Hayden being controlled by a fist with a ring that says CIA on it. The inference being that the CIA was actually controlling the SDS. One of the things in Washington, D.C. is there were so many different law enforcement agencies working and not talking to one another that confusion inevitably erupted. One of those was a creation of a phony bookstore called the Red House. The Red House was a bookstore created by the D.C. Metro Police just under the Vietnam Veterans Against the War offices. And the purpose of the Red House was to set up kind of a headquarters for the underground press where they could drop off papers, where they could have New Left brochures, other types of things like that. The Red House was so believable that no one knew it was a phony, including the FBI. And the FBI actually bugged the Red House bookstore, not knowing that it was a creation of the DC Metro Police. They also sent an agent named Butch, quote unquote, into the Red House to steal their mail. Once again, not even realizing that it was a creation of the DC Police Department. The Red House was basically a clearinghouse, so to speak, for any type of materials that the Students for Democratic Society might want to drop off. Maybe some of the Weather Underground may want to drop materials off for distribution. The Quicksilver Times and Washington Free Press newspapers, Off Our Backs, which was the first women's liberation newspaper, was distributed there, as was The Furies, which was a paper published by a lesbian feminist collective in DC, which Rita Mae Brown, the author, was an original founder. All of them were materials from the New Left that needed a place to be distributed. Many distributors in the Washington, D.C. area would not allow underground papers to be put in their locations. There was really an iron grip that the distributors had in the DC area. So the underground press had to resort to either street vendors to sell their papers, which most of them did, or some smaller locations like head shops, record stores, and bookstores like the Red House that did not require a distribution company to deliver papers to them.
University researcher Dale Brumfeld persisted, bugged the FBI through Freedom of Information Act requests, and acquired documents that show that the FBI and other intelligence agencies illegally penetrated anti-war movement, civil rights movement, and the free press, underground free press, and tried to not only gather intelligence, but disrupt and destroy it. And it's good to finally have documents that prove this.